In the world of cider, it's never entirely clear-cut on one exact style. In fact, all over the world, there's different styles of cider being made. Now, this isn't just about whether it's a dry cider or a sweet cider, because ciders, well, they could go the whole gamut of becoming fruit ciders, where you have an addition of something like peaches, or, as I have done in the past, bananas, too. Maybe you might throw in some different kinds of berries like raspberries or blueberries. And then there's also spice ciders where, yes, I have fermented with ginger into the apple juice. I mean, it's really, the sky's the limit, and it's really due to the very welcoming nature of the apple. It's like the perfect neighbor. It's just like, everybody come on into the neighborhood. Check it out. Jump in the glass. Let's see what will come out, which is the best part, I think, of cider making. And one of the reasons why I'm going to be leading a Totally Cider tour to both Normandy and Brittany this September. And in this year's episode, we're going to be speaking to a maker who not only makes cider and Poire, but also a very regional drink that is only really found in Brittany, which is called Chochen. So I'll be telling you a little bit about that, and you'll get to meet in this here episode Arnaud Jouny, a French cider maker from Brittany, that we will be visiting this September 2022.
Hey, apples, make them pop, 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 pop.
Hey, my name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Oh my goodness, it feels like a light year ago, whatever that means. I think that's like a really long time ago in the space world, that I rolled out an episode. So much has happened between last week and this week. If you don't recall, or you are new to the podcast, last week we had on Patrice Giard. Now, Patrice is based in Pays d'Auge, so he's in Normandy, versus our featured guest this week is in Brittany. Both of these makers we're going to be visiting on the Totally Cider Tour this coming September, and I am super stoked to go back to Patrice's domain. He is the 13th generation of cider makers on that land. Not many people can lay claim to that. I mean, that's one of those like give you shiver up your spine kind of things when you think about that. 13 generations. I mean, I'm connected to where I live, but I don't have any kind of claim to fame like that. I can only imagine 13 generations from now what my future ancestors would be like if they came back to my land. I mean, I can't even like comprehend that. And there he is, like a living, walking museum of this amazing farm. And one of the things that we really heard in last week's episode, which is true all over the world, is that apple orchards are always under threat of development. And you wouldn't think so in Normandy, but it is true. And they are doing their best to kind of preserve the traditions, which only really pushes me to kind of get there and go out to the world more and more so that I don't miss this moment. And I'm hoping that you don't miss this moment either, because it does change. It changes really quickly. In fact, a cider and Poire maker that I was hoping to visit has sold their farm. Luckily, the folks who bought it are going to continue doing the production. But that bottle of Calvados that we brought home from Philippe and Marie Claire, so those of you, you know if you know, right? That bottle that he siphoned directly off of the cask into unlabeled bottles for us to take back from our last Totally Cider tour there. We'll never get to experience that again. That was like a moment in time that was captured in that bottle and will never come again. Look, I don't want to get over dramatic, but for me, that kind of brings a weeping tear through my eye, no doubt. And I know all of those folks who are on that tour, some which I believe still have a wee bit of that Calvados left, you're going to make that last even that much longer. I mean, just save the bottle and sniff the inside of that bottle, right? Oh my goodness, it'll last a lifetime. And it brings a flood of memories back. That's the thing about taste. It brings memories. Something that an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, a mother, a father made food. My mom, she doesn't cook anymore, right? But she made bread. I can still remember what it was like walking in that kitchen and smelling her homemade bread or tasting her coleslaw, which was so unique. I try to replicate it, but I can never make it like Mama. But if I think about it, I have that memory, it lasts me a long time, and it's comforting. It's rooting me into a moment in time that meant so much to me, that just grounds me completely. And more often than not, it has to do with the people that worked on that particular taste with their utmost love and skill. And that's what it's all about. Cider, what is in that glass is so much more than the liquid. It's about our connection to the world, to family, to tradition, to people. And that's what kind of keeps me going on. I'd be curious if you have thoughts about that. Is there a particular bottle, a glass of cider, perhaps it was an apple brandy, that just made a moment in time unforgettable for you and you savored it? I bet there is. I bet there is indeed, which is one of the reasons why when I lead a Totally Cider tour, I always encourage everyone to bring an extra suitcase. And I have a whole thing about how to pack your cider to bring home, how to, really preserve the bottles. So everybody always shows up with an extra suitcase, and we fill it to the freaking brim and bring these cherished liquid memory bottles home with us. It's like a perfume that lasts a lifetime. So cool, isn't it? Anyways, we're going to take a little break here. I'll be right back with some more good cider news for you.
Walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We're just walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Kick up those feet now.
I have a little email here from Brad, who just became a patron of Cider Chat. In case you don't know, Cider Chat is listener supported. So folks, sign up to the Cider Chat Patreon page and help keep this podcast on the air. Brad writes, I am a newcomer to Cider Chat, but already such a huge fan and working my way through the, quote, catalog, unquote, to catch up. So I'm glad to be able to support it, as it's such a great listen. I also subscribe to the Northwest Cider Association Club after hearing about it on the episode. Yay, I'll put a link in the show notes to that club. They package different compilations of cider from their region, and it's a great gift to give people. And, I was talking about for a number of weeks, because they were sponsors of Montana ciders and the Montana apples there. They're really well known for McIntosh, so I'm stoked that you did that. He goes on with, I first listened to the podcast earlier this year after it came up in a search I'd done for Western cider. I'd somehow come across Western cider last summer and ordered a bunch of their ciders and was curious to know more of their backstory. I found it on Cider Chat. My journey with cider has been start and stop. Back in the early 2010s, when I was in my mid-20s, I got into cider as a result of what is probably my favorite all-time television show, River Cottage. If you haven't seen it, and I haven't, Brad, it's about a guy who leaves the city for a rural life. There are some reoccurring characters, his neighbors, who make cider and host the Chedock Cider Circle. That is totally cool. I'm going to look it up straight away. My brother and I loved those episodes and had a short stint fermenting cider in glass jugs in our closets. Never great, but fun and good enough. Recently, I got back into it because I've always dreamt of moving into agriculture. My dad grew up on a farm, which is now a typical Midwestern corn and soybeans operation. My grandpa passed away recently, but my grandma still farms it with the help of my dad and uncles. I'd love to take it over one day, except for two hang-ups. First, I'm not interested in that style of farming. And second, with a wife and kids, it's hard to move away from my career to a pretty hard and low-paying job. Yeah, farming is a tough one. So he continues, I thought that an orchard and farm-based cidery could be a perfect mix. Right on, man. That's where I am in my journey at the moment. Learning, planning, daydreaming. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. It's entertaining and informative and dangerous. Because after every episode I listen to, I must always go to their website to see how I can buy some. Hopefully more get on board the Patreon train and more like-minded companies join the sponsorship roles. Oh, thanks, Brad. Thanks for those points there and for your belief in Cider Chat and all that it brings to you. I really appreciate it. And, keep on dreaming. Keep on practicing cider making. It is a skill. It's a craft that grows over time. It sounds like you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And thank you so much for becoming a patron of Cider Chat. And for those of you out there in Ciderville listening, you too can become a patron. Just check out the Cider Chat Patreon page. It's spelled Patreon. Just Google that with Cider Chat. Alrighty, my favorite time of the podcast where I get to share with you a recording with someone that I have met along the way. And in this week's episode, we are going to a recording that I took on site at this cidery in Brittany. And it's one of the destinations that we have on the upcoming Totally Cider Tour to France this September. And my friend Pamela, who I work with, she's my French counterpart, I would say colleague, right, who helps me set up the tour. You heard her on last week's episode. She translates. She's going to be with us on site the whole time. She really wanted me to go to this cidery, one, because she knew that I would dig the fact that it's all organic and that the maker here is very strict about that, doesn't apply anything to the orchard, has a bunch of feelings about that, and is really trying to follow that model of, or does, not just tries, but does follow that model of being an organic producer. So the other piece here that Arnaud Jouny, that's his name, the products that he makes, he has cider. I mean, this is kind of true for all the makers in France, and you don't just like do one thing like just cider and that's it. So check it out. He has cider. He has Poire. He doesn't always have Poire on site because it's either been a good year or a bad year. So hopefully this year, 2022, he will have the Poire. And then he will also distill these products. And one of the things that I brought home from him was a 100% eau de vie Poire. Okay, so it was 100% peri pears that were first fermented and then distilled into an eau de vie. It just blew my socks off. And that's something that you can't find too often. So that was like a rarity. Remember I was talking earlier, like bringing these amazing little bottles home that are a taste of that region, a time capsule in the bottle that you can only get if you visit there. You're not going to find this kind of product. And a lot of the makers in the Domfront region, which is really renowned for peri pears, they, as a rule for the AOP, the appellation, is that they have to have a minimum of 35% peri pears in their Poire or their Calvados. See, in Pays, they're just fermenting cider and creating Calvados that way. But in Domfront, which a lot of people don't realize, is that their Calvados has to be a certain percentage of peri pears. So you can imagine how it really differs from going to Pays, where we'll be drinking the Calvados there. Then we go to Domfront, where you have this blend of peri pears and cider. And then what we're finding more and more, and what I try to encourage them, is just try like 100% peri pear and see how that happens. So when I met Arnold, and he had an eau de vie that was 100% peri pear, he knew it. I had to have that, taste it, and you're going to hear me talking about it. It just knocked my socks off. So I was super stoked about that. And so let's kind of review this again. So he has cider, It's kind of overwhelming. He has cider. He has poire. He distills, right? So he has this like eau de vie. He might have some Calvados. We don't know. And then he has this other product called Chochen, which is really a French term, and it's only made, as far as I know, in Brittany. I think I did see some in Dauphinté, but it's really well known in Brittany. And remember, in Brittany, they're a unique region because they classically will pour the cider in a cup, kind of like a teacup. So it's like a ceramic cup. And I think traditionally it was like you did that so you wouldn't see all the floaties in there because, they didn't really care about that. It tastes good. Who cares what it looks like? But now it's just kind of been their signature way to serve their cider. So don't be surprised if you're in Brittany and you're expecting like a wine glass or a fluted glass, and instead you get a ceramic cup. This is the cool stuff, right? The cool stuff of each region of the world. So he has Chouchen, and Chouchen is really unique. And so allow me to take a pause here again, and I'm going to come back and just describe what Chouchen is. So the story goes is that Druids are responsible for Chouchen, and Druids, around the time 500 BC. So we're talking a couple of years ago. And there's a lot of Druid history in this region because remember, Mount Saint Michel is right there on Brittany and Normandy border. And there's often it seems like a not too talked about dispute because they don't want to focus on it too much. Like, where is Mount Saint Michel? Is it in actually Normandy or Brittany? The people in Bretagne or Brittany will say it's actually Brittany and, vice versa. But I won't get into that argument. I don't really know. But we do know that Druids were on Mount Saint Michel. And then for a while on Mount Saint Michel, there was, it was a lot of different iterations of existence there. There was a prison for a long time. Then the Jesuit priest came there. They're still there. There's an abbey on top. When you have such an amazing landmass like that, it's really something. And it's only recently that Mount Saint Michel became a World UNESCO Heritage Site. Really, I'm going to say in the past 20 years that happened. Up to that point, there wasn't even a land bridge that you could get out to Mount Saint Michel. It was a tidal. It's just a tidal way that, you made it out in time or you didn't, and you had to hang out, which might be kind of cool. But when you're thinking about the thousands and thousands of people that go there, they really had to build it and build it up. So this region of France has really ancient history, and the Druids were around, and they like to drink. And evidently, the mythology goes that if you had a glass of Chouchen, you would fall backwards, fall asleep, and wake up a few days later. So when you hear that, you're probably thinking, well, that sounds a little bit like some of the mead mythology, and you'd be totally right, because there is honey in this drink called Chouchen, but it's made a bit differently than your classic way that one would make mead. So let me back up a little bit. Mead would be where you are fermenting honey, and mead could be sweet or it could be very dry. So that's what typically mead is. It's fermented honey. Now, I have made Cyser. I've talked about Cyser many times on this podcast, and Cyser is where I will take fresh pressed apple juice. So let's say I have 5 gallons of fresh pressed apple juice, and I will add somewhere around 3 pounds of honey to that fresh pressed apple juice, and I'll ferment it all together. And I always used a yeast called sweet mead yeast, and that will leave some residual sugars. And it's not really a mead because the bulk of the base there is all apple juice. Well, the thing about Chouchen is that it isn't a Cyser and it isn't really a mead, because the way it's made is you first ferment the fresh pressed apple juice into cider, and then you add the honey. So it's not like a truly fully fermented mead, right? It's not fermented all the way. And the honey that one would traditionally use is buckwheat honey. Now, buckwheat is a very, very dark honey. Most of the honey that you see in the grocery store, you look at it, it's like an amber or maybe like a very light golden color. That could be like a wildflower honey. You'll have different variations of that color. But buckwheat is where the bees are going to a crop of buckwheat, and then they make their honey, and that is a dark brown honey. So that's what it would be traditionally made with, is with buckwheat honey. You just have the apple juice, you ferment that, and then you add the honey. And the profile that you would get would be honey coming forward, some vanilla, because you want to, what they would do would be to ferment it all in and condition it in an oak cask, and of course the apples. And this is an aperitif. It's something that you would sip and probably not drink in a big old glass of wine, right? It's more of a sipper. And Brittany, this is one of their like specialty drinks that they have. Although I have seen it in Domfronte. So remember, there's Pays d'Auge in Normandy, and Domfronte is also in Normandy. And Domfronte is a little bit further to the south, so they're right on that Brittany border. And there is like overlapping that happens where people, start producing some of the stuff of their neighbors. But by and large, you're going to find the Chouchen producers in Brittany. And that's why I thought it'd be super cool to go to this cidery, because he has it all. He has Chouchen, and he has a cider and Poire, and he also distills it. And he has this organic twist to it all. So that's why we're going to visit Arnold. It's going to be on our afternoon. We'll be cruising out after we have the morning in St. Malo, and then spend the afternoon going to his cidery and another cidery that I'll talk about next week. So you're going to hear a little bit of our conversation. This is a small snippet on our trip to Arnold's domain. And we're going to start where I'm actually trying his eau de vie for the first time. And you'll also hear from Pamela, she'll be interpreting some of the things here. Now, something I want to say about listening to a recording from another country where a person is non-native speaker, he's very guarded on how he's talking because, think about it. He's a brilliant man, but when he's speaking in another tongue that he's not used to speaking in, such as English, he takes a lot of pauses. I edited out those pauses to try to get right to the point. And there's a couple key pieces here that I'll go over at the end, or maybe during it, to help you understand what's going on here. But I thought this would be a really nice piece with Arnaud Jouny of the Domaine Jouny in Brittany, France. Right, so I'm trying this Poire. It's eau de vie Poire. I see it says 45%, and the nose is so floral. In fact, it's even more floral than the cider eau de vie. It just pops out. Let's try to taste it. Totally different experience. It actually, as you're chewing it's a little electric, and not in a hot way, but then it's so smooth as you actually drink it. It really is. It's so exciting to me to be able to taste a 100% Poire. It's so soft and delicate, and yet kind of like persnickety, like a pear, and kind of playful. You're thinking, okay, it's going to be really hot, but it's not. Let's take another sip here. It's sweet. There's like a sweetness coming from that too. It's just perfect.
You like it?
I do like it. It's surprising to me because, like the sorbitol in the Poire, it's like coming through. It's like there's just a sweetness to it that it's just not going to let go, even when you distill it. And that it's also surprising too. As I'm sipping, I'm thinking, it's going to be hot, but it's not. It like opens up in your mouth and smooth. It's a smooth finish. You want to smell that and stuff? I know you do.
Ah oui, en effet.
Right? Kind of comes out? So you're getting the pears.
In fact, you know that it's very, very difficult to make a good poire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
1 year only I do some poire because the 3 years.
You didn't have enough product or fruit.
Yes, but
fruit.
I know that it will not make a good poire, so I distill it. I don't want to make poire with it.
But yeah,
because
so you distill it to this.
Because I'm really looking for something
for the poire.
For my poire.
Yeah.
So I prefer at this time distilling it more than making poire and
every year.
Because it's not the poire that I like to make.
Okay.
I see. Yeah.
When I will be sure, I will do every year poire, but no.
What are you looking for in a poire? What defines a good poire to you?
We've got a difficulty to make it naturally. I don't want a fruity poire. I want, like my cider, you see. The difficulty with poire is to have the amertume, but to not have the
astringency at the. Okay,
it's very difficult. When we've got the pear, we have to test it for the pulp is in contact with the juice, and the difficulty is also that pears with more facility going to vinegar. Good products, I need food that are mature in maturity.
Cool. Yeah.
But the limit of maturity and vinegar, it's not so it's a lot of things for making a good poire. And at the end, the step of fermentation in bottle, there is no gasification, only with the yeast. We know how to do that with the cider, but with the poire at this time, no one knows. Even in Normandy, no one knows. When we test the cider before bottling, we see if its stability. The poire, even in June, you can be sure that it's very in stability. You put it in the bottle and...
Now, what Arnaud Jouny is talking about is something that I've heard many producers of poire in France talk about, and that is stability in the bottles. In fact, many will say they will not export their poire because they don't feel it will export well, which is another reason to go to France, of course. How many more do you need? But anyways, this is a big problem in that the stability in the bottle, and I'm not sure if it's because of sorbitol, which is just naturally occurring in the pears, and that they don't want to filter it. Some of the poires that we do get exported to the U.S., for instance, have been filtered, and so that there's a certain stability there. But these more artisanal makers, they don't want to do that. And they're really watching out for that kind of explosive bottles. In fact, if I sometimes get a bottle from them, they'll say, well, you're not going to be putting that on the plane, are you? You have to drink it before you leave the country. And of course, I've been able to bring it back, and it's been okay. But, this is the beauty of cider and poire, is that you have to go there to drink it, to really experience what it's like, because it changes in transport. It really, honest to goodness, it does change. And it's just, you don't know until you know, and you've tasted in one location and another. And I've never had an exploding bottle of it, but none of these makers want to be the one who said, oh yeah, we had one of yours and exploded. So that's what he's talking about here. So he doesn't really want that same kind of profile as cider. He doesn't want the astringency, so you're going to notice that there's less tannins in the poire. And instead, he's really looking for the fruit to be pronounced in the drink. Yeah, those pears, they're very particular pears.
But cider, we know. We know how to do it
Right.
with natural yeast inside the bottle. The why we don't know this time. During a long time, people who made calva, they were thinking that it was necessary to make a very good cider for making a very good calva. And now we know that you have to make a type of cider for making a good eau-de-vie. And the criteria are very different. A cider for distilling and a cider for
drinking, straight up, yeah. So we have two things here that are going on. One is that he is saying calva, and he is basically referring to Calvados. So in Brittany, it would not be unusual to hear people refer to Calvados as calva. And then he is saying that when you are going to distill it, you do not use the same kind of cider apples that you would use for a cider to make Calvados or calva. You have to use different types of apples. And in the case of Poire, when he's using Perry pears, he's going to use a particular group of Perry pears for making Poire, and then he's going to use another different group of Perry pears for making Poire that's going to be distilled into calva. I think this is a really important fact to know around the distillation and the cider making in the country of France, is that not everything's the same, right? They have a very complete set for their cider and their Poire of different apples or pears that they use, and what they use for making into Calvados is going to be completely different. That's why he didn't have the right pears that year that I was visiting. That was actually in 2020, and why he had no Poire on hand. And he just decided the Perry pears that he had were only going to be good for making Calvados. Then we continue on. On this one, you said, well, you didn't like it as a Poire, so you decided to distill that. How soon after you started fermenting that did you realize I want to distill that?
It depends. Every year it's not the same. And last year, first I tried my Poire in February. I say no.
Yeah.
I will distill it.
Right.
I go in May. I tested it. It was not the same product at this time. I said it's very good to make Poire too. I've put it in a bottle. I've to make a little to try. And 3 weeks before I tested.
It's not my intention to confuse you further, but yes, it's true that they have very select pears or apples to distill. But sometimes they will choose to just distill a product that is not going the way they want it. And that's basically what went on here, and that's what he's talking about. So there's a fine balance, right? In cider making, you're not sure which way it's going to go. You must let the palms lead you. And now we're going to continue. You're going to hear us talking a little bit about climate change. Because as I was in the building with Pamela and Arnold, all of a sudden it started raining like the dickens outside, and the wind began to howl. Getting a little bit of wind here. Is that typical?
Yeah.
No.
Before no. No, it's typical since 5 or 6 years. Because you see here in this area, before in winter, the wind comes always from the west.
West, right?
West.
Right.
West.
Yeah, the
west.
channel would be the west.
Yes, and since 5 or 6 years, it always comes from
the south,
southwest,
southwest, yeah,
southwest. And since 5
so it's changing the weather patterns.
And during January, February, you always got this type of
interesting,
winds, which is
strong.
It's not the tempest, but it's strong.
Well, you have a good building here. Yeah. This is kind of like my home. I have board and batten in my home, and this is on the outside of my home at least. Did you build this?
Yes.
You did it, yeah. You did it's a good, strong building. Kind of holds up to it. That's wonderful. I'm really impressed what you're doing. It's good. It's good for the heart.
I hope one time you can test the Poire.
I plan on it. I'm coming back just for that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I cannot wait to return. That's coming up this September 18th through the 24th for the Totally Cider Tour headed to France. We'll be out there in Normandy and Brittany and sipping and savoring some of the special products that Arnaud Jouny of Domaine Jouny has produced over these past couple years. So if you're interested in that, please go check out the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com. The reservations are open and they will be closing on May 31st. Oh, no! Well, yeah, we can't leave it open forever. And look, May 31st, it's just a little ways away, and there's still plenty of time for you to make plans and sign up for this Totally Cider tour. So again, check it out at the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!